Good evening, everybody. I sat down and I saw the sign, "Dear Anxiety, let's break up." That's how I feel right now. I am a psychologist. I speak to parents, teenagers, and children, not so much children, but I speak one-on-one. So it's always uncomfortable for me, and I always have anxiety when I have to talk to large groups. So I hope you'll forgive me tonight as we go through this talk. So first of all, I want to acknowledge the two people who I interacted with. I don't know who you are. I don't know who they are. And if you hear, first one was Hannah Hartman. Not sure who that is. Is she here? And Miriam Laziel, another person who I interacted with. I want to thank them for acting so professionally and setting this up and working out the details to make it possible. I want to make a correction. First of all, it is true I am a psychologist. I don't have a private practice here in Brooklyn. My private practice is in Minnesota. I do come to Brooklyn once a month, and I do see clients here in a home office for 2-3 days a month. So I do come here once in a while, but my proper private practice is in Minnesota. And this is for me, being here today is completing a circle. And it's completing a circle because I spoke at the yeshiva in Olitaya. I spoke about teenagers. I speak to adults. And now I have an opportunity to talk about kids. So I'm looking around and I'm seeing that this place was set up for probably a few hundred women. And there's about, I don't know how many women are actually here. But I actually don't blame those women who are not here. And I think it speaks to the exact reason and the problem which we have today. And that is, we're going to be talking about the dangers and healthy screen time for little children. And the real problem is that everybody is so busy. We are all overly busy. We have so many things to do. We just don't have enough time to do everything we want to do. I'm sure a lot more people wanted to be here tonight. They just weren't able to be here because there's so much going on. Life is a constant sacrifice with so many things to accomplish, and we just don't have enough time. So I want to step back a minute, and I want to start with a small Dvar Torah, something which I thought about when I learned Chumash yesterday. Parsha starts off with the words, "Vayidaber Shmuel Moshe, Su es Rosh B'nei Yisrael L'fkudeihem." And then he goes on to say, "Su es Hadas B'nei Yisrael L'fkudeihem." It says you should count all of the B'nei Yisrael to their number. And then it says, "L'beis avoisam," to the fathers' homes, "L'mishpachaisam." And then it says, "B'shmoisam," by the name, "Kol zocha l'gulgaloisam." And I think this is a very important lesson for us. The Rebbe tells us that Su'es Reish means it's our job to raise up Klal Yisrael. Su'es Reish, raise them up. How do you do that? You start with B'nai Yisrael. We start with a community. We start by strengthening our communities. After that, after that is our responsibility to strengthen the families and Beis Avoisam and the parents. Families and parents. And after that, we can talk about B'shmoisam, Kol Zochar L'Gulgaloisam. We can talk about each and every person after that. When we want our children to be strong, we've got to make sure that our communities are strong. We've got to make sure that our families are strong, that we as parents are strong, and then we can expect our children to be strong. The conversation tonight about screen time is just as much an issue for us as parents as it is for children. And I had the opportunity to talk, as I said, to Bachrim. I now have the opportunity to talk to parents about their children. So I want to say some statistics starting at the top. First of all, my specific area of expertise as a psychologist, borderline personality disorder. I used to run groups, and work with individuals who struggle with personality disorders. And I also now have been working a lot with internet addiction, with couples, and I thought in the Jewish community or in the community at large, this was a problem more for men than it was for women. It's not. It's an equal opportunity issue. It's a problem which starts, it goes all the way from adults, it goes all the way down to teenagers, and it's now flowing all the way down to children who are struggling with what we call internet addiction. It's happening all over. The divorce rate is going up, and unfortunately, many divorces which I see and I hear about have a lot to do. Does my voice sound that bad?
No.
I would say that a big percentage of the couples conflicts which are going on centers around cell phone use and centers around screen time, where one of the couples is too involved in their phone or too involved in social media or something like that, and they're not fully present for the other person or for the family, and it's causing a tremendous amount of conflict. I would say the same thing about Bachrim. I do not have that much experience with girls, even though I do work with them once in a while. That Bachrim who are struggling in yeshiva, a big part of their problem is that they have access to cell phones. The same thing is with girls. The girls who are struggling, as I said, I don't have that much experience, but the issue is often that they're involved with their cell phones too much. And now we're starting to see the same problem with children, and it's just going down the line. You know, as you were speaking, and you were talking about the feeds that you were having on your Facebook, I realized that I'm not even the right person to be standing up here. I grew up before the Facebook generation. And I will say to you that to me, the cell phone is a tremendous excitement. It has a tremendous pull for me, because as a kid, we didn't have things like that. And the idea that I have in my pocket access to all the information in the world, information to anything I want right there in my pocket, is such a strong attraction that for me, this cell phone is a problem. And I did become addicted to my cell phone. And being addicted to your cell phone is a problem because you go from one thing, looking at general things, and you look at other things, and then you end up in places which are inappropriate. And so I think it's important for us to realize that this problem that we're going to be talking about children, as I've said over and over again, is a problem for all of us. And the first step, of course, is putting filters on our phones. And not only putting filters on our phones, but putting filters on all our devices and making sure that we have them. Because without that, we're not going to solve the problem. Even today, I was talking to a couple about cell phone use. I was actually talking to a blocker also about cell phone use. And he said to me, I don't want to solve the problem with a filter. I want to solve the problem inside me, why I'm going to the cell phone. And the truth of the matter is that he's right, that the couple is right, that they want to solve the main problem. But the fact of the matter is, we will not be able to address these problems. We will not be able to address the cell phone issue at screen time without first restricting access. You cannot work with a drunk who's an alcoholic while they're still drinking alcohol and while they still have alcohol in front of them. We must first restrict access. That's the first thing we've got to do, is restrict access if we want to get anywhere with this problem. And so I think that's an important thing for me to mention up front, that goes without saying that we need to restrict access, not just for our children, but for ourselves too. Put filters on your phones, put filters on your Wi-Fi. I don't have to tell you how many stories, I will tell you, so many stories of children who go home, pick up a dumb phone, an old phone which is already broken, has no service on it whatsoever, and it's your children, your sons, your daughters are picking up these phones, having access to your Wi-Fi, and using their phones to go to places and to be up all night and to struggle because they can't get out, they can't break themselves up from their addiction. And so it's up to us to recognize it. Please do not wait for this to become a problem. Please do not wait until your child grows up before you start putting on filters. Today, children are becoming addicted to their cell phones and getting caught up in social media and inappropriate sites at the age of 9, at the age of 10. And every year, it's getting earlier and earlier. I did not even realize that kids would have any interest in things like this at such a young age. But the fact of the matter is, they are. They can be turned on to these kind of things simply by seeing something at the age of 8 or 9. And they can get turned on and they can be damaged irreparably. And so it's important for us to start off the right way from as young age as possible. Make sure that you've got proper filters. Talk to TAG. I understand that TAG comes to Crown Heights on a regular basis. They will help you do these things. Some things you need to know is cell phones have controls. You put filters on cell phones, and you can also put filters on Wi-Fi, which means the actual Wi-Fi router, you can put filters on them. This is news to me, by the way, so it may not be news to many of you, but this is information that's important for me to share. Okay. So, interestingly, everything which I'm going to share with you tonight, you can find on the web all over the place. There's nothing new about this. Just a couple of weeks ago, an organization called the WHO, which is the World Health Organization, came out with new guidelines about screen time. And those guidelines were that children under 2 years of age should have no access to screen time at all. There's nothing healthy in children having access to screen time. No benefits whatsoever. Children over the age of 2 to the age of 5, 1 hour a day is more than enough. And the numbers go up. And what they found out was when the numbers go up, as the ages go up, it's appropriate to give them a little bit more screen time. Now, I am referring to people who are not Fruma people, not Fruma Yidden, and the entire world is open to them, and they really have no restrictions on what they want their children to see. And they're talking simply from a physical perspective, from a psychological perspective. And from a psychological perspective, they are recognizing all sources, all professionals recognize that. Very few professionals will disagree with that screen time for our children is not healthy. By the way, in Minnesota, I'm a therapist, and I would say 60 to 70% of my clients are not Jewish. And the clients I work with have the same issues. The internet addiction and the media addiction is the same problem for them as it is for us. It causes the same damage. And it hurts them just as much as it hurts us, and it's a problem for them. So I think it's important for us to understand that the issue which we're struggling is not just a Jewish problem, and it's not just a Hasidic problem. It's a problem which the entire world is struggling with and trying to figure out. For us, of course, this problem is even bigger. And the reason why it's bigger is because we're trying to raise our children al Taras HaKodesh. And once upon a time, we had to worry about our children leaving the home, we had to worry about our children leaving shul, leaving school, to be able to be exposed to these things. And unfortunately now, these things are right there in our home, right there in our bedrooms, right there in our children's bedrooms, in our children's backpacks. And so, for us, the problem is even stronger. So I'd like to talk about some of the things about screen time with children. The latest research shows that the more young children have screen time, the more time they are on their screens, what we see is as they get older, they tend to struggle with symptoms like ADHD. We also know that immediately after kids are on the screens, that right after that, when they get after that, it reduces their ability to focus, it reduces their ability to concentrate, they become a lot more irritable, they become a lot more frustrated, they don't listen to their parents after they get off the screens. And so there's clear evidence that screen time, the more screen time children have, the more it correlates with negative behavior. There really is no positive benefits from excessive screen time. Now, I do want to say some other things. I want to talk about the positive, however. I do realize, and I realize nowadays, that there's a reason why parents are giving their children cell phones and why parents are giving their children tablets. And that is because it is a great babysitter. It is a great way to manage our children. We are overly busy, we are overly tired, and we need something to give our children so that they can be busy and that we can recuperate, so that we can have a few moments of silence. And it's true, and that's something which I can't blame parents for doing. And so, if you feel that you need to give your child some screen time, go ahead and do it. But understand that that is a last resort. Understand that if you're doing that, this cannot be a replacement. Got worse after the surgery. Now, this is clear evidence that adults are affected by blue light from computer screens. Now, here's an important thing to understand. Computer screens and cell phones are not the only place where you get blue light. You get blue light from the sun. The problem is that when we get it from the sun goes down at night, and we don't have so much blue light around. The problem with the cell phones is, and the problem with screen time is, that we're constantly bombarded by blue light. And one of the things blue light is responsible for is our circadian rhythm. Our circadian rhythm simply means that natural body clock, which tells us when it's time to go to sleep, when we are tired, and when we are wide awake. And so, if we are watching cell phones, if we are looking at screens all the time, and we are watching these things at night, it's going to interfere with our ability to sleep. And here's the interesting thing. When our sleep is interfered with, our mood is interfered with, and it causes mood disorders, increases depression, and not only that, but it also causes other mental illnesses. And the most interesting one of all is that when people don't sleep enough, they eat a lot more. And that's one of the reasons they are saying now why we have an obesity epidemic in the United States. There seems to be a strong correlation between screen time and eating. Now, some of you may think that has a lot to do with exercise, and it does have something to do with exercise, but the reality is it also has to do with that blue light which the kids are seeing. So, one simple solution is you can get filters, and some of the later apps like the later tablets like iPhones and things like that have an adapter, have an ability to put on a blue light protector on them to reduce the blue light. And so that is a solution to use. But it is important to understand that these are affecting our children and causing many, many different effects on them. Other interesting things. A study was done, and again, like I said, I don't remember all the details, but if you want to, anybody who's interested in seeing all these studies, you can send me an email, and I would gladly forward you all this information. I have it in one long document. You're welcome to see it. A study was done, and the study showed that our children today spend less time outdoors than prisoners do. In other words, prisoners in the United States prison system spend more time outdoors than our children do. That means that our children are not getting the kind of natural stimulation, interactivity, learning to play, learning to develop, learning to communicate with one another the way they used to. All of that they're getting from the cell phones. Another interesting thing, when they ask children about exercise, many children believe that playing video games is a form of exercise, and it's just as good as exercise. And it's true. The children who are doing these things are playing these things instead of going outside. And so what's happening is, besides for the blue light, our children are not exercising, they're getting heavier. We also may think sometimes that the children are socializing because they're on social apps. Most of the children, however, are not on that. But even our older kids who are on social apps like Facebook and things like that, you would think that it increases their ability to socialize. However, all the research shows that the more children and the more our teenagers are on social media apps, the more depressed they become and the more anxious they become. And the reason why they're becoming more depressed and anxious is obvious. When I talked to the girls in Benos Menachem, I think it was, the girls naturally knew why, and that is because of FOMO. The more access they have and the more connected they are with their friends, the more they're feeling bad, the more they're feeling that they're missing out. And when they see things on Facebook, when they see things on Instagram, and they are feeling like everybody else's life is better than theirs, everybody else's life is better than mine, and that causes anxiety and depression. And also the sense and the need to show off, to show that their life is just as good as other people's. And so at all levels, we are seeing that screen time is becoming a problem for our children. And so what can we do about it? What we need to do about it is we need to take control of this epidemic. We need to do something about it. So let's talk about some ways to deal with this. The first thing we need to do is recognize that we can't ask our children on their own to take care of this problem. One of the biggest things, we may yell at our children and we may say to them, get off your phone. It's time for supper. You've got to stop playing that game. We need to understand that our children cannot do that on their own. It is a lie to believe that our children can turn off their phones on their own and come to supper, or to turn off their laptops and come to supper. That won't happen. And if some of you are seeing that it's happening, you're very lucky, because it doesn't usually happen. And the reason is because there's a new thing called persuasive engineering. Persuasive engineering is a concept which was developed by cell phone companies and by the laptop companies and by software developers. And persuasive engineering is using the same techniques which they use to train rats in a cage. And they're using the exact same techniques to train your children, our children, to stay on the phone and to stay on this app, whichever they're using, and to stay on it and to become engrossed in it. They're using all the psychological tricks to keep our children on that app for as long as they can. Persuasive engineering has become such a problem that psychologists and educators have started an organization to fight against this, to hold the app companies and the software companies responsible for the way they are developing the software, that it is naturally addictive. Because the stuff we're using today, the apps which your children are exposed today, are naturally addictive. Your child's brain, and this is a quote, your child's brain is being engineered to stay on that phone or to stay in that game for as long as they can and to go back to it over and over again. They use exactly the same techniques as which are used in gambling halls. If you go to gambling casinos, how do gambling casinos work? They give you what's called intermittent rewards. How do people get hooked on gambling? You get a small reward, you get a bigger reward, then you get no reward. It's called intermittent reinforcement. A reinforcement, a reward which you're not expecting or doesn't come on a regular basis. You never know when it's going to come. So you go back again and again and again just to get that reward. That reward for a child can be a smiley face. That reward can be a little bit of a song. It can be, ding, 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 you have reached the top of this level, etc. All of these things are devious. What do I mean by they're devious? They are designed for persuasive engineering to keep your child stuck. So, This is not something, when you walk away from here, please don't take home the message, I need to tell my children that they shouldn't play on their phones more often, as much as they do. Or I should tell my children that they should get off my laptop because it's bad for them. That's not going to happen. I'm hoping that the lesson from tonight is that we as parents have to figure this out, how we let our children use these devices, because they by themselves cannot control it. So where do we start? The first thing is, be an example. We ourselves need to be an example. And I want to back up. What does it mean we ourselves need to be an example? Our children see us coming home. Our children see us getting onto our phones, getting onto the computer, enjoying ourselves. Our kids want to do the same thing. It's burned in my mind. It is burned in my mind. This picture, about 15 years ago when I was in shul, and I had to daven in a later minyan, and I went down to a yeshiva in Minnesota, and I saw the boys davening beautifully, and some of the parents were in the back talking, and one of the parents was on his cell phone, and every few minutes, his father got up from his cell phone. He wasn't wearing tefillin because he had davened earlier, and he said, and got up and he saw his kid wasn't looking inside in the siddur, and he said, gets up over to his kid and says, look inside and daven. Why aren't you davening like a mensch? And then he went back to the back of the shul, and he kept on his phone. And what does that kid think? That kid thinks, now I have to daven. But when I'm an adult, and I will be just like my father, then I will be able to have my own cell phone, and I will be able to be on it. And so we need to be more careful about how we use the cell phone. I want to plug over here an app which somebody showed me, somebody by the name of Yossi Marazav, a shliach in Cleveland, and he heard one of my talks talking about the cell phone, about managing cell phone, and he has developed an app, it's called Present. And this is an amazing app. And what it does is, you download it on your phone, and what you do is, it's called Present, because the idea is that you're giving your family a present by being in the present. And what it does is, by pressing, I think, one button on your phone, press the app, it basically disables the entire phone, and the only thing the phone is good for is for receiving phone calls. That's all it does. It will not allow any beeps, any rings, nothing. Once you press it again I tried to put it onto my phone, but something was wrong with the download, but he explained it to me and I read all the work on it. Amazing concept. Because what that idea is, and the reason why he developed it was because he realized that we ourselves are struggling to be present for our children. We ourselves are not able to be present for our children because our phones are such a distraction for us. And what we need to start doing is create an environment where our children see that we are not using the cell phone, that we are present for our children. The best way to do that is to use technology to beat technology. And that's what this app does. And by pressing one button, and he described to me when he saw his own problem that he was using his cell phone all the time. Now what he does is he says as soon as he comes home, he gives his phone to his children. They press the present button on it. And once they press the present button on it, the phone doesn't work. And his wife does the same thing. And as long as during supper time, for a designated amount of time, I think there's a timer on these things, he set it on a timer, the phone becomes inaccessible except for phone calls for people. I think you choose what people you want. Well, it has different settings. But the point is that we have to start, set an example. We have to start with ourselves. Nothing will work if our children don't see that we're setting an example. That's number one. Number two, be a parent. Be a parent means we need to take responsibility for our children's education. This is not easy, and it does mean we're going to have to make tough calls. What that means is we are going to have to say sometimes to our children things which they don't want to hear. We're going to have to set limits. And one of the problems with cell phone use is, like all addictions, when you take away the addictive substance from a child, from somebody, they are going to go berserk. And that's exactly what happens when you try and take that thing away from your child. Your child will go berserk. By the way, it's not only your child. It's your teenager who's going to do the same thing. And not only your teenager, but your spouse. How many of you have seen when you ask your spouse to get off the phone and you end up getting into a big fight because they are very irritable and they're anxious and they're frustrated because that thing is so absorbing for them. You're moving them out from something you're taking them from something which is so pleasant and so all-engaging and distracting. They don't have to worry about whatever they have. They can totally zone out into that thing, and now you're taking them away from it. So how can you deal with this? So there's a couple of ways you can deal with this with your children. One way is have specific times when you say to your children, you have 1 hour on the screen per day, or a half hour on your screen. Nowadays, this is not that hard. Some of the phones or the items which you are using, some of the technology which you're using has already got it built in. I know that the iPads and the iPhones have already built in. If you have an Android, you can download it. It's not very hard to download, and you can set up for your children however you want to do it. You can set it that it only works for an hour, then it goes off. You can set it that it goes off at a certain time, and things like that. Take the sting out of it, which means that you're not the one who's constantly reinforcing screen time. You're not the one yelling, get off the phone. You make it a simple transaction. And 15 minutes, 10 minutes, tell your children, this is how it goes. You've got 15 minutes. And my recommendation is, don't have big debates with your children. Oh, I didn't get my 15 minutes because of this, because of that. They get 15 minutes. That's what they get. And also, a good idea is, and you read all the research shows, do not use screen time as a reward. That's not a good idea. Because what you do is, you associate screen time with, they do something good, they have the ability to use screen time. There's no better way to convince a child, to show a child that screen time is a positive thing. But you can use screen time as a punishment. That is okay to do. And what that means is that if you set up with them, they can watch 5, 10, an hour, however much time you think is appropriate. If they don't behave, they don't get that screen time. That is fair to do. That makes sense because you're not giving it to them as a benefit. You're taking it away from them if they're not behaving or if they're not fulfilling their obligation. So I think that's important. Another important thing is because of the blue light issue, and not only that, because of multiple other reasons, it is not a good idea that our children are using any screens, even little children, even using screens which are not connected to the internet. This is a question I get quite often. What about computer games and things like that? Not a good, I don't even know if they exist today, by the way. Computer games are not connected to the internet. Not a good idea to give to children at least an hour before they go to sleep. Why? They're not going to be able to sleep. The refresh screen, that means the fact that the screen refreshes itself 40 to 50 times a minute is something which you and I don't see, but our brain does see. And it stimulates the brain to such an extent that the children cannot calm themselves down and just fall asleep after playing a game. And that's why when they're on their screens, they're wide awake. The screen will actually stimulate them and will stop them from being able to go to sleep. So, those are some of the things important to know. Another thing is, if you're going to take away the screen from your children, and if you don't believe that your child should be watching these things, know that you've got to substitute it with something else. We cannot ask our kids to not have a screen, not have a computer, not have a cell phone, and not give them something else instead. And there can be simple things like markers, Legos. And yes, we are going to have to go out and buy things and spend money. How much does a phone cost? A good phone costs $700. So you're going to have to go out and spend $700 to buy toys and to keep your child excited with different things. But besides just giving them other things, we need to interact with them. And I know this is different for our community than it is in the outside world. When I read this, interact with your children. Sit down on the floor. Play with your children. And I'm thinking to myself, sure, when you've got one child every 5 years, you can sit down and you can play with your children. But when you've got 9 children, that's not exactly going to happen. It's not possible to play with every one of your children all the time. Fortunately, the good news is that it is not quantity time which matters all the time. Sometimes it's quality time. Being able to interact with our children and letting them feel special. There are certain things which our children need which they don't even know. They don't even know that they need them. I speak to 14-year-old boys, 15-year-old girls, and I say to them, do you have a good relationship with your parents? And a lot of them say to me, yes. And I say to them, do they know that you have a problem with a cell phone, with the internet? And they say no. I say, well, what do you talk to your parents about? Nothing in particular. Talk about the weather. These are boys in yeshiva, girls away at school, seminary, whatever it might be. And what I'm finding out is that the children themselves do not even know that they're lacking connection. And some of us as adults don't even realize that we're lacking connection. Every kid, and this is something I repeated many times before, every child wants to feel special. Every person wants to feel special. Every person wants to feel loved. Every person wants to feel cared for. Why do we get frustrated when we see our spouse on the phone or on the computer? Because we feel left out. Because we feel like they're more excited, they're more involved in that screen than they are with us. And we start to feel left out. There's nothing wrong with that feeling. That's a genuine feeling. And it's a fair feeling to have. That we want to be cared for. We want to feel special. We want to feel liked. Our children want to feel special. Our children want to be liked. And the way to do that is to connect with them. And I cannot stress this enough. When we come home from whatever it is, when our children come home, connect with them for a few minutes. Give them the time. Give them the time to be able to relate to them, to let them know that you care about them. Parents sometimes don't know how to do this, but just taking the time to talk to them, asking them about their day, getting down onto their level and asking them about what's going on in their life is so important. This is easier when our children are younger. And it's a lot harder when our children get to the age of 12 and 13 and 14. But that's why we need to do it when our kids are younger. We need to connect with them. We need to show them that we care about them. The other thing which is important is, I believe, by the way, I have been speaking about the safety of cell phone use and the safety and setting up filters. I have watched a lot of families where they will not allow their children to even look at a screen until the age of 5, 6 years old. And by the way, most of the research shows that there really is no benefit for children to have to look at a screen before the age of 5 or 6. Some of the myths about technology is that we need to teach our children, expose our children to technology because we are in a technological world. Well, let me tell you something. Today, laptops, tablets, and cell phones are designed that animals can use them. That's how simple they are. Our children do not need early exposure to become familiar with the digital world. That is a lie. Actually, a person can pick it up at the age of 20, and within 10 minutes, they will be able to figure it all out. And if you don't believe me, ask your grandmothers. They will tell you that that's true. Most of them, at least. Some of them are still struggling. It's easy. There really is no reason for it. It is true that there are some times when our children do need apps and do need technology. There are certain apps which are out there which are highly interactive and they're highly valuable, especially for kids who are slow at math or slow at reading and things like that. Those things are great for our children. And it would be sad if we don't give our children access to those things if they need it. If you've got children with special needs, children who are weaker in certain areas, and they have access to these things. But here's the interesting thing which the research shows. The research shows that the better designed the app is for children, the less the children want to spend on that app. So, if you want your children to be on your computer or be on your phone, watch what happens when you start to give them apps which help them do better with their spelling or do better with their math. Watch how much they'll be wanting to be on that cell phone, how much they'll want to be on that app. They will self-control and go off it when they need to. Why? Because it's exactly the same thing as health food and junk food. When you give your kids health food, they self-monitor. When you give them junk food, what are you doing? You're stimulating one part of the body while starving the other part of the body. And what happens is they continue to eat because they want to satisfy that craving for protein. They want to feel filled. And they don't get filled, so they continue to eat because they're assuming that the more they eat, the more they're going to become filled. And it's the same thing with junk technology and healthy technology. When we provide healthy technology to our children, they use it, they get enough of it. When we provide to them junk technology, it ruins them. So, I hope that the walk away from this is that, yes, sometimes technology is a good thing. Sometimes our children can benefit from it. There are many programs out there which are positive, which we can give to our children, but there's definitely not enough of them, and that's definitely not what our children are watching. Another important thing, please, when you give your children the cell phone to use, especially your own cell phone, make sure that you are watching them all the time, that they are watching that in a safe place, that they're watching it in a public place. And I just want to make a plug, like I said, my own cell phone is protected. Make sure that your cell phone is protected. I cannot tell you how many times kids will tell me that they borrow their parents' cell phone, they borrow their parents' computers, and they use it to go to places which are unhealthy, and they get exposed to these things. Another interesting thing I believe is a good, healthy way to manage technology is to have a place. I think I heard somebody say earlier that there was a basket outside where people would put their cell phones. Now, that is a great idea. Not only is it a great idea here, but it's a great idea at home too. And this is something which parents need to buy into. And I know I'm going to get some comments afterwards where people are going to come over to me and say to me, I agree with you, Dr. Shagalow, but my spouse doesn't agree. My spouse needs his phone for certain things, etc., etc. It's true. That is a problem. But I don't know what to answer you about managing this technology problem if we cannot set an example for ourselves. And I think what's important for you to understand is that we will not be able to solve this problem with our children if we don't solve the problem with ourselves first. I am finding more and more that adults, teenagers and adults are not skilled at having long-term relationships with each other and learning how to interact with each other and to be patient because of their own cell phone use. I see it in shidduchim, I'm seeing it in marriages, that there's some basic skills which our children are not having because of their exposure to to technology. And so we need to get hold of this earlier on in their life, at this age, especially at the young age, at the age of 2, 3, 4, and 5. These are the most formative years of a child's life. You know, another study I saw was that, you ever heard of fetal alcohol syndrome? Fetal alcohol syndrome is children who have been exposed, whose parents have been exposed to alcohol, and children whose parents have been exposed to cocaine. Their brains are underdeveloped, and they have difficulty with cognition later on in life, and especially in the early years of their life. We're starting to see that kids who use technology all the time and are exposed to screen time a lot are having similar problems, which means that their brains are just not developing the same way other people's brains are developing. Those kids who do not have access to it. So, these are just some of the most basic things which I can share with you tonight about cell phone use for young children, about the dangers of cell phone use. Some of the positive things I can share with you is, and I know I'll get flack for this, but giving your children a cell phone to use once in a while to play a game for a little while, 15, 20 minutes a day, while you're watching them, while you know they're carefully watching, and it's monitored, and they have a specific time frame. Before they start, they know how long they're going to have that game for, or that whatever it is they're doing. That will be fine. But please make it a game. Don't make it YouTube or anything like that. Once you show your child YouTube, your child is going to grow with YouTube. And YouTube is not an appropriate place for your child to be. YouTube today is as bad as anything can be. And so, please, if you are showing them something, if you want them to look at something, make sure that it's a filtered phone so they don't have access to this. I saw a little clip somebody sent me on WhatsApp of a 2-year-old kid. I don't know if any of you saw this. Somebody sent it me on WhatsApp. A 2-year-old child who's cute. The father walks over to the kitchen cabinet and he knocks on the kitchen cabinet. And as you watch it, you have no idea what's in that kitchen cabinet. And the father opens up the kitchen cabinet, and in there is a little kid, and he's watching on his father's cell phone. He's watching something, like a video. And the father says, "What are you doing in there?" And the kid says, can't even speak properly. He says, "Oh, close the door," he's telling his father. He's cute. He says, "Close the door." And the father laughs, and the father closes the door. And the cute part of this whole video is that a 2-year-old has found himself a private place to watch videos under the sink in his own house. And it's going around as a cute video. But the reality is that's very sad, because that child has a best friend under the sink in the kitchen. And that's his parent. That's the parent who's babysitting him, who's taking care of him. The father is going to find it cute today, and that's why he sent her on the video. But in 3 years from now, when his child is going to graduate into even worse addictions, that father's not going to be smiling as much.